Coming up on Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace.
I had no idea why I was acting like a crazy woman. I did not want to touch my child. She wanted a hug. She just wanted to be close. I didn't care for that. And John just couldn't understand why I was the way I was.
Welcome to a place where we discover the freedom and healing found only in Jesus Christ. Through powerful stories, our guests tell how He turns pain into peace, rewrites lives, and restores the wholeness only He can give. This is Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace.
I'm Gina Butler, the Executive Director of Deep in the Heart Ministries, and today I am interviewing our very special guest on the Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace, because our special guest is Dr. Grace. You're in for a great treat because you're going to get to hear her testimony, what makes her heart tick, and how she came to know Jesus and how He has made a tremendous impact in her life and completely turned her life around. Grace has been my friend now for 15 years nearly, and we have really enjoyed being together these last few years, working with Deep in the Heart Ministries. So welcome, Dr. Grace, to your very own podcast.
Thank you, Gina. You did a great job of introducing me.
Yeah, well, I learned. So, I told her, for the audience, I told Dr. Grace, I said, just let me lead you, okay? Just let me lead you. So that's what we're going to do. And the first question I'm going to ask you, Grace, is tell me about growing up.
All right.
This is all new to me, too, because we've never really had this conversation.
Right.
So.
Well, Gina, I actually was born in Taiwan, and I moved to the States when I was 3. So my parents were first-generation immigrants to the United States. And so they had my sister and my brother a year after, and we all moved to the States. And my parents, they were your traditional, strict Asian household, more concerned about grades, about your accomplishments, all of that. And verbal and physical affirmation wasn't displayed in our house. And so, as a young child growing up in the States, in Western culture, I felt like I really was missing something. And so my childhood, for the most part, was a very good childhood. My parents, I know now that they loved me, even though that was never said. But I grew up feeling I just never was good enough. And so,
would you attribute that because of the difference in the culture, coming from an eastern part of the world to the western part of the world? And I mean, they've lived in one culture all their lives, and then they come to the West, and it's completely different.
It is, Gina. And now, being so much older, I understand that. Mm-hmm. But as a teenager and a young adult, I didn't.
Yeah. Did you go to public school or private school?
I went to public school. And so...
And are you bilingual?
No. But I understand Taiwanese. I just can't speak it. Mm-hmm. So I wish that I had learned the language, though, because it would have been cool to be.
Did your parents just not want you to be able to speak the language?
No, or they were very much like, okay, y'all are going to get immersed into this culture. They didn't want us to really stand out to be different per se. They wanted us to have the same opportunities. Mm-hmm. So my mom I think they were fine with us not really keeping our native language. Mm. And so English was the primary language. And my parents spoke a mixture of Taiwanese and English. Mm-hmm. And so even to this day, Gina, when my parents get together and they're arguing about something in Taiwanese, I look at John and I'm like, it's a good thing you don't understand Taiwanese. You don't want to hear what they're talking about now.
So did you move? Where did y'all move to? Where did you go from Taiwan to where in the U.S.?
Well, we've lived multiple places, but Michigan is where I spent my childhood. So Michigan summers, elementary school, middle school, and then we ended up in Houston when I started high school.
What did your dad do?
He's a radiologist, and so he's a retired radiologist. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom until later on, and then she went back to school. But they did their very best. We didn't have a whole lot material, financially wise, but we did not go to church on a regular basis. And so
What kind of religion did your parents practice?
they came from families, generations of believers, actually.
Really?
In Taiwan, it's only like 1% of the general population are Christians. And so their marriage was arranged because my dad's family and my mom's family, they were both Christians. And there weren't a whole lot of Christians back then.
Right.
So they both came together, and they would tell you that they believed in Jesus, that they were Christians. But I think being in a foreign country, they didn't feel comfortable and never really found a church that they would regularly attend.
So it was just non-existent.
It was non-existent. They didn't talk too much about faith at home. If you'd asked me as a young child, did I believe in God, I would tell you, yes, I believe that there's God, there's Jesus, but I didn't have a relationship with him.
Right.
And so
he was just someone you knew about.
Right.
Somebody you knew about.
Right. So, but my parents, they did the very best they could raising me. And as we get into the story a little bit more, there were a lot of things that I blamed my parents early on in my life for the issues that I was struggling with. But now I realize they did the very best they could.
Right.
And that it is not their fault.
Right. We forget as children, as young adults, as teenagers, that our parents have never been a parent of a child, a young adult, or a teenager. It's all their first time too.
Right. Right.
So you moved to Houston. Did you go to high school in Houston?
I did. And I was at A. Leaf Hastings and graduated from there and ended up going to UT Austin. When I left the home, Gina, my mindset was, I need to get away from this house.
Yeah,
because
you're ready to go.
Felt so overprotected and controlled.
Now, are you the oldest?
I am. Are you surprised?
No, I'm not at all. So what's the age difference in the kids?
Well, it's my sister's a year younger.
Okay.
And then my brother's a year younger.
So it's just stair steps.
Stair step. Yeah. All three of us.
So when you left, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, my oldest is leaving. It's time for you to go. This is what we do. This is how you be successful.
Yeah.
You go to college and.
Yes.
What made you choose UT Austin?
I don't know. It's a good question. All three of us ended up there. Really? We all ended up being roommates, all living together. My
Really?
parents had found a place for all of us to live. And so I think it was just an easy route. My parents just knew it was a great university. I knew I was going to be pre-med. And so
you went in knowing you were going to do pre-med. You went in with the goal of college at university to be a doctor.
I did. And so, but my mind at that time, Gina, was I'm just going to live my life the way that I feel like I should have been living my life, but never was given the opportunity. And then that's when I went off the deep end. And
which happens most of the time when students come out of a very strict household. Their first semester at college, man, they are wild as all get out.
I know.
They do everything that their mama said you cannot do.
Right.
And so that's what you did.
That is what I did.
And what happened?
Well, I ended up in a relationship with my first boyfriend. And
so you had not had a boyfriend prior to?
Not anybody serious. And he was a year younger than me, but we ended up being sexually active. And the first semester of my freshman year, I found out that I was pregnant. Now, this was 1985, and abortion had just become legal.
Yes.
So I'm thinking like the rest of, what we're taught is that this is your right. This is just a clump of cells. This is something.
My body.
My choice.
Simple. I can do what I want.
Yeah. You're never going to have to think about it again. It's not going to affect you.
So you never even did you ever entertain the thought, I'll keep the child?
Oh, no. My parents would have just totally disowned me.
So they had no idea?
No, they never knew. They didn't know until many, many years later after I shared that.
It was your secret.
It was my secret.
Did you tell the young man?
So he knew. And when I had asked him what did he want to do about the situation, he said, whatever you want to do. So he didn't step up to say, yes, we need to have this baby. So it was my best friend who took me to the abortion clinic that day. And that is a day I'll never forget. I mean, I can go back there in an instant and remember a lot of the details from that day, because going through it, I had no idea. You know, I think subconsciously I kind of knew, like, okay, this is my child, kind of, but I didn't verbalize it. I wouldn't think it consciously, because
when you went into the clinic, did you have like multiple trips to the clinic, or did you just go in that day and say, I'm Grace, I'm here, I want to have an abortion? And they said, okay, no problem. There was no counseling. There was no think about this. There was no, are you sure you know what you're doing? Have your parents found out, or any stuff like that?
Oh, Gina, none of that happened. And from what I can remember, you know, you call, just make an appointment, and you just go in there, and they just make sure that you're, you know, in first trimester, and I don't even know if they did an ultrasound. I'm not sure ultrasounds were a thing back then.
Probably were not.
You know,
I don't think so.
And there wasn't any questions asked. All they wanted was my money.
Wow.
And so,
where'd you get the money?
From my best friend. And so I had to pay her back. And so, you know, many, many years later, Gina, I wrote a letter to my best friend, and I told her, and I sincerely apologized to her and said, I'm so sorry I put you in this position. You know, she's Catholic. And so it was something that she carried for decades as well. And thankfully she forgave me. But at the time, we're 18. We don't know any better. We're trying to get out of this mess. And so I'm thinking this is the best decision, because I got to finish school. I'm going to med school. I cannot take care of a baby. And so I chose to end the life of my child. But
so you walk in an abortion clinic, say, I want an abortion, and you walked out without a baby. Same day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was an outpatient procedure. And I remember bleeding, hemorrhaging actually quite a bit. They did not tell me how much bleeding I was going to be and how bad. And something changed. I mean, even though I wasn't a believer then, I think every single woman who undergoes an abortion, they know inside really what happened, even though they may never admit it to themselves. And so after that abortion, my life took such a different trajectory. Like, I developed an eating disorder. I started doing drugs and alcohol, behavior that I never really had. I mean, I wasn't allowed to do any of that when I was at home, but to the degree that
it was almost like there was no holds barred. Whatever I wanted to do is what I did.
It was medicating myself. I did not want to remember the abortion. And so, you know, promiscuity, all of that, Gina, I mean, the next 4 years, it was just a blur. And I had no idea I was struggling with PTSD symptoms from the past abortion. But when I did go through my abortion recovery, I did finally like pinpoint all those, you know, connected all those dots that, oh yeah, the abortion happened in October. And then all of a sudden I'm like being a crazy woman. And then finally
Did you ever tell your brother and sister?
Not at the time.
So you're carrying this for 4 years at the university. You're carrying this secret alone, except for your best friend.
Right.
And the young man.
And yeah.
Did the young man stay in your life?
Oh, no. Relationships hardly ever stay together after an abortion. So
So it's just you and your best friend going through this?
Pretty much. And I did not ever think about the abortion again for many, many years. And so, but what that abortion did to me took me, Gina, to the very pit of my life, where I remember one day saying, God, I don't want to live anymore. Like, the eating disorder, my bulimia was out of control. You know, I just I mean, I was somehow passing, and I somehow made it into medical school.
That was my next question. How in the world did you pass?
I did, by grace of God now. But at the time, I just was living life so like crazy. So I finally hit rock bottom, and I
Where
said,
you hit rock bottom?
It was first year in medical school.
So you'd already graduated UT Austin.
I did.
Headed into medical school. Where were you? Where'd you go to medical school?
At Southwestern in Dallas.
In Dallas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you hit rock bottom. Did you go to a church? Did someone walk alongside you? Or it was just you and God?
It was me and God. I had started counseling with a psychiatrist there for my eating disorder. Mm-hmm. And it started bringing up like all the different things that I had been through. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, it wasn't in a church. I mean, I don't remember the exact place, but it was a come to Jesus moment of like crying out to God, God, you are going to have to be the one to save me from myself. Otherwise, life was not going to be worth living.
Right.
So that's when I finally accepted Jesus and quit trying to, do life the way that I was doing life. And because I was making a mess of it.
Right.
A total mess of it.
When you accepted Christ and you realized what he wanted to do for you, what was your next step as a baby believer? Where did you go? Did you seek out a church or?
Well, the funny thing is in our medical school class, which we had a class of 200, and actually we were all very close. And so when I first started school, I hung out with the party people. Mm-hmm. So I did the party thing with them. There were a bunch of fun gals and guys and all that. But then there was another crowd of Bible believing Christians who were attending church regularly, who were getting together with their Baptist friends. And that group included my future husband, John. Mm-hmm. So when I did become a believer and I started going to like the Christian Medical Dental Society groups, I started going to Sunday school, I started attending church, and I started getting new friends and a new way of looking at life because I knew what my old life was like, and I did not want that old life anymore. Mm-hmm. And I just knew, Gina, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. You know what I mean? And John and I, we didn't date until our last year of med school. So we just had a friendship. So it wasn't John that led me, to have a firmer faith, although he definitely is a rock in my life. But at that time, it was really the Lord and I walking this through and him showing me the things that needed to be changed in my life,
I think that is so cool when we hit the bottom like that and we realize it's really just us and God. It's just me and you, Lord.
Right.
Teach me what you want me to know. And that's what you did.
Right.
You didn't have someone holding your hand, mentoring you, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But you didn't have someone mentoring you and bringing you along and saying, okay, Lana, we're going to start reading in the book of John.
Right.
It's a good place to read, to begin, which it is. It's you just said, Lord, reveal yourself to me.
Right.
And that's what he did.
Right.
And so eventually, after being in medical school 3 years and knowing this gentleman named John English, when did that little romance spark?
Oh, Gina, he's so slow. It took him a year to ask me out, but I finally got him to ask me out. And so we were dating our 4th year of med school, and then we got married after our intern year of residency. And he was the one that I thought, oh my God, he grew up in the Beaver family.
Yeah. Leave it to Beaver family.
Yes,
right.
exactly. Didn't commit a sin in his whole life, which is not true. But, I just felt so like, oh my God, I'm not worthy of you, kind of thing. And one of the first things I felt when we started dating, even though we had been really good friends, we knew a lot about each other. He did not know about the abortion.
So you had never shared that with anybody in that group?
Nobody knew. And
Still your secret.
I knew that was one thing God said, this is something he needs to know about. And I was like, no, I don't want to tell him. Because I thought he would break up with me.
Right.
So,
Which is, normal. That's the way we would think.
right.
Sure.
Right.
Be rejected, and nobody wants to be rejected. And
Exactly.
You know.
And so, the day I told him, sitting at, the White Rock Lake in Dallas and finally sharing with him, and I just remember him just saying, the Lord's forgiven you. I obviously forgive you as well. And inside, I was totally, totally relieved. And I was like, okay, I did it. And then, we just moved on. We didn't talk about it. Mm-hmm. And then we ended up getting married. Mm-hmm. And we were married for 3 years before we started having kids, Gina. And
so did you, I keep interrupting, but that's how
you're
you answer
fine.
these questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So you and Dr. John get married. Did you practice medicine before you had children?
I did. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we were 2 years in residency, so we were in training. So, and then the first year we moved out to Tyler, we both joined the Trinity Clinic group.
Okay.
And so in 97. So I worked full time while I was pregnant with Sarah. Mm-hmm. And so, but when we got to Tyler and interviewed for our jobs, I knew that I did not want to work full time because I wanted to be available to also be a mom. Mm-hmm. So the clinic was very gracious and they said, whatever you want. And so when Sarah was born, Gina, I went down to 2 days a week, mm-hmm. which was a lot more manageable. So, because he was in medicine as well too. And
did anybody besides John know about the abortion at this point? Had you ever told your parents yet?
No. My parents didn't know. And I can share that later.
Yeah. I'm just keeping the story in line here.
No, nobody knew. It was a secret. And in my mind, Gina, I knew that God forgives all sin. Mm-hmm. So that included my abortion.
Right. Yeah.
And that was a mental, whatever, principle. But I'm like, he forgives all sin. He forgave me for my abortion. And so I never thought about it. I didn't go more into it.
When was Sarah born? What year was she born?
November of 97. And so, beautiful baby, just loved, just happy baby. And then Daniel came 18 months later. But even though I never talked about the abortion was coming up, was bubbling up in me.
I was going to ask you, when you saw that little baby for the first time, did you think about that, your abortion?
I did not, because I had closed it off in my mind for so many years. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure I just did the routine prayer, God forgive me for my abortion, and left it at that. So I didn't want to feel any of that.
Right.
So, and it was actually okay with Sarah and I, but until she became a toddler and started having, toddlers are more difficult and blah, 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 blah. But parents, this is a side note. I think a lot of kids are screwed up because their parents are screwed up. And
yeah, that's a good note.
So I was that screwed up parent. Mm-hmm. Trying to potty train my 2-year-old. And I remember Gina just having these huge meltdown and outbreaks and screams of grabbing her by her arm and throwing her into a room. I can see how parents can physically abuse their children. And I had no idea why I was acting like a crazy woman. Mm-hmm. And I did not want to touch my child. She wanted a hug. She just wanted to be close. I just didn't care for that. And John just couldn't understand why I was the way I was. Mm-hmm. And so when we moved to Tyler, I met Beverly Klein, who is the founder of Living Alternatives. And it's and Beverly ended up being my mentor. But when I moved to Tyler, I told her about my abortion because she was safe. Right. She had 2 abortions in her past. God had redeemed that. She started this maternity home and pro-life ministry. And I was like, so Beverly did know. And so when I started seeing, in real life, where is all this anger coming from?
Right.
I knew there was something seriously going on in me that I needed Jesus to show me what it was. And so Beverly, she kept inviting me to an abortion recovery study, and I kept telling her, I'm fine. I don't need it. You know, I'm good. Finally, she never stopped. So I finally said yes. And Gina, that night that I walked up those stairs to that Bible study, I thought that was a really hard thing as well. And I knew by then that this abortion was not rectified. You know, it was not even explored.
Right.
Because I knew walking into a room full of other women who also have had an abortion, why did I feel so much shame and guilt?
Right.
Why did I not want to even say those words, not even share the story of what exactly I had chosen to do? So the next 3 months is when we started walking through the Word of God, and Beverly led that group. And I began to see that, look at all the lies that I had believed, look at all the things. And you finally get to that point, Gina, where you're like, oh my God, this is my flesh and blood. This was my child, my future generation that I had ended their life. And so women have to get to that point.
They do.
They have to own up to it. But God doesn't leave you there. He doesn't leave you there, because he showed us, Gina, all of us in that study, and to anyone who's had an abortion and has had healing from the Lord, that the moment that your baby had their last breath, they were with Jesus.
Right.
And God showed me then that I had a baby boy. I named him Jonathan. He would have been 40 years today. And so he's 40 years in heaven. And that once I gave him that, I recognized his humanity and his life and his soul and his spirit. The Lord just brings it back to be such a blessing to you. I mean, it's only him that can do that.
Right. Yeah. It is only him. I mean, we can't, because the enemy comes at us with shame and guilt. And, you know, you're never going to amount to anything. You have no business walking in this room with these women. You have no business trying to marry this man, you know, all this kind of stuff. And that's all the enemy. And that's what he used, the lie that he uses against us. Only Jesus can redeem that.
He is the only one, but he makes you walk through that valley, that road, to experience and understand, what did you do? What do you need to own up to? And in looking at the tragic consequences of your decision. But at the same time, he's walking you, and he's like, this is not the end of the story. This is just the beginning.
So you walk through, you went that 3 months. At this point, you have Sarah, who's a toddler, and
Daniel, and I was pregnant with Matthew.
And you were pregnant with number 3.
I was, yes.
You were pregnant with number 3.
And I mean, to this day, Gina, my 3 are the greatest blessings ever on this side of heaven, apart from John and my faith.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And I knew when that study showed me that the reason why I was not connecting with my living children is because I didn't feel worthy to be a mom. I didn't feel worthy to receive love. I didn't have the love to give them, you know, and it was this guilt thing.
That's right.
Of like, I'm going to punish myself. I don't deserve anything
good. The martyr complex.
Yes. And so, but that study helped me realize, like, no, I am worthy to raise these children that God is still, in His grace, have given me, despite my horrible decision that I'd made many years ago. And so once I started knowing that and started understanding His forgiveness and the healing that He was bringing to my life, that then started changing me more into the mother He wanted me to be. And I mean, praise the Lord that all the kids are walking with Him now, Gina, and they, you know, are pursuing Him. So, I mean, that's the greatest gift any parent
absolutely, yeah,
we pray for.
So how did that, once you got to that point and, you know, God used His word to impact you, and you begin to internalize it and believe it for yourself.
Right.
Own it for yourself.
Right.
How did that change your relationship with John, with your kids?
Right.
I mean, I've heard you tell the story about how it was to be a mom, but I know it had to affect your relationship with your husband.
Oh, of course. Of course. Any baggage that we carry from our past, you're bringing it into your marriage. And if you're not dealing with it, it's going to be affecting it. And so, but John, he has always been so gracious, Gina, and he has always been very supportive of, later on when God called me to start care, about sharing my testimony. And I shared with the kids when they were probably 8 and 10 about my testimony.
That was my
next question. I felt like they needed to know.
How did you tell your children? I mean, because God calls you to do care.
Right.
And so
7 years later after my healing, yes.
When he does that,
right,
you can't do care and the secret not be out.
Right. Exactly.
So how did that transpire?
Well, that was another hard step. There's a lot of hard things that God asks you to do that you don't want to do, but he sees you through it.
Right.
You know, and so, but no, I had talked to John about it. Matthew was too young, but the older ones, 8 and 10, they had a right to know. And they're, in the children's department at Green Acres, and I was going to be sharing it publicly, and the last thing they need is to find out from somebody else. And so, but the night that I did share it with them, Gina, it was just really, really sweet. I mean, Sarah, she didn't say anything after I shared with her. Basically, I was just very, basic fact, like, mommy chose the wrong decision and this is what happened. And they knew what abortion was. And, and she came back later, Gina, and she was like, so Mom, when people ask me if I have 2 or 3 brothers, what do I tell them? And I was like, oh my God, she gets it. And I was, obviously, well, Sarah, just say 2 because it's a long story.
Yeah, it's a long story. Just go with the 2.
Right.
Just go with the 2.
But, Daniel, my black and white child, he looks at me. He's like, Mom, I would have just had the baby and given it up for adoption. And that's what
he's 8 years old telling you this.
And he told me that. So it was good, and I think when God asks you to do hard things so he can move you maturely into the next step, it's not going to be as hard as you think it is.
Right. And
it's actually going to be freeing for you, and it's actually going to be healing for you and better for your relationships.
Absolutely.
And so yes.
When did you start care? Tell us what does it mean? How did it work? When did you start it?
Yeah, so 2007, I heard clearly from the Lord, I need for you to start abortion recovery Bible studies for women in this area because there wasn't anything ongoing. Bev was very, very busy with living alternatives. And so I thought, you know what? Yeah, I could do it because I knew how important and what a change it made in my life. Then I'm like, okay. All right, Lord, I think I could do this. And so we just started under the umbrella of Green Acres Baptist Church because that's our home church. And, I just met with the women's minister and I was like, hey, I want to do this study. And could we just start, advertising that we're going to have it? And so for the next 3 or 4 years, Gina, we just did studies. The women were not just from Green Acres. They were from all different churches. And so, but we always met like at a non-church, place. And it just looked like as the years went by, God just brought my team to help me because all he asked was like, I just want you to lead a study, but that was my part. But then he was asking all these other people to come on in, help me co-lead and help me, start. And we founded CARE and became a nonprofit in 2011. So it was after several years of doing Bible studies. We already had that down pat. But then I felt like, oh, you want us to be a nonprofit? I'm like, I don't even know anything about a nonprofit. I don't even know what a 501c3 is. And so, but he knew people who could help us in that process.
Right.
And so, and it was very clear by then that we needed to be outside of a church. and
standing on its own,
being able to share with the community, what we do and all that. And so anyhow, CARE then formed in 2011, and I was very active on CARE probably for the next 3 or 4 years. And then I finally stepped off. And as you know about me, you know, God tells me to start things, but I don't necessarily have to stay in it. But I don't have to, but he brings people behind me that, you know, an executive director was, you know, hired finally in 2014 was BJ Garrett. And then when she got hired, I felt like, okay, there were plenty of other women on the board who was going to keep the mission moving forward. So, but CARE, I mean, I'm telling you, Gina, I have just seen so much. It's unreal to see how these women and these men are changed so much with the Word of God after they have been through a study.
Is CARE still going on today?
It's going on today, and it's going very strong. And so, and
where do they meet?
They meet they meet in Tyler, but there's different groups going on. There's weekly and there's weekend retreats. And recently we just did an abortion recovery training for a local church, you know, equipping the church members and the pastors on how to talk to women and men who've had a past abortion, because a lot of people don't know how to do that if you've not been in that world.
Right.
And so, but yeah, CARE is going really strong now. I'm still, you know, in dialogue with them, but I'm not, you know, on the ground doing the ministry anymore.
No boots on the ground.
But I still love to share my testimony. And like, you know, by the time this episode airs, you know, the Culture of Life event would have been done already. And you know, Claire Colwell, who survived her mom's abortion, this issue is very near and dear to her heart. Like she asked me to share my testimony there. And God has been I would have never imagined, Gina, God would have sent me to China, Jamaica, across this country, go to the March for Life in DC twice, and all the different things that he's done to be able to, you know, get healing for the men and women who've had a past abortion. And so
let's circle back. What'd your mom and dad say when you told them? How was it going? How did it go with them?
Well, how do you think it went? Did not go well. I wrote them a letter.
Yeah. And at this point, you're married with 3 children.
Oh, exactly. And I didn't know how they were going to receive it.
And it's years down the road.
It's years down the road. It was when CARE started. And all I received back was a letter that said, you know, that's fine, that God's forgiven you, but we feel like you should not talk about this because it's going to bring shame to John's family. None of that is true.
Right.
And so I could read between the lines.
Right.
It was going to bring shame to them. And so.
Do you ever feel squeamish? I mean, I know we feel squeamish when God asks us to do something like this and to be so transparent and to share something that we have kept hidden for so many years. And we're scared to death that it's going to hurt our family and that kind of thing. Well, did you ever, could you see a difference in before and after in relationships? Did you feel like some people went, you know, and just kind of shunned you? Or were you always welcomed with open arms? And how did you respond to that?
So when I knew that God was asking me to start abortion recovery, I knew that I wrestled with that. And it wasn't easy. I really wrestled with it. And I remember having almost a panic attack prior to sharing my testimony in front of like 600 people one weekend at a fundraiser.
That's enough to give anybody a panic attack.
I know, especially talking about your abortion. And so, but, you know, Galatians 1:10, one of your favorite verses.
Absolutely.
Am I trying to please man?
Mm-hmm. All right.
My parents? What my reputation?
Mm-hmm.
You know, blah, blah, blah. Or am I trying to win the approval of God?
Mm-hmm.
And so it goes on to say, if you're trying to please man, then you're never going to be a servant for God.
Doing that a long time ago.
Right.
You know?
So that is the grace that God gives you to say, this is my story that you've experienced, and I need for you to tell others about it. Mm-hmm. And so that is what I remember when I go up there. It's not about what I look like, what comes out of my mouth, what are people going to think about me. It's about what Jesus has done in my life. And I'm telling you, Gina, anytime I share, I always get people that come up and just hug and love on me. And I've had others that maybe look at me differently, but I don't really care. So,
Imagine that.
Right.
Imagine that.
And you're the same way. And you're just like, no, if God tells me I'm going to do this, I need to follow.
That's right.
And, but it's not necessarily easy, but you still just walk out in faith. And, because, if you decide that you are not going to choose to listen to him, he will find somebody else that he will use.
Absolutely.
And you will be the one missing out huge blessings.
You will miss the blessing.
And,
when you left, you didn't really leave care, but when you stepped off the board and began to do other things, how long, I guess, during that interim time between leaving there and beginning the DITH ministry, acronym DITH, Deep in the Heart, what did you do in the meantime? Raise your children. Yeah. I'm sure they had to all graduate and all that kind of stuff.
And I had quit working for money and was volunteering at Bethesda Health Clinic. And so, and that's another God story. We take care of working uninsured patients. And so the listeners would know that Gina's very involved at Bethesda Health Clinic, and my husband founded it. And so I was volunteering there, Gina, and then I was doing some hospice medicine for several years, part-time. So I was kind of dabbling myself back into like my career life. And and I went back to paid work part-time in 2016. And so, but then I was only still working 2 days a week, and I still always had time for ministry and all that. And so during that period, Gina, before Deep in the Heart was started, I was asking the Lord, what is it that you want me to do next? I knew abortion recovery, that was a thing of the past. What was it that you wanted me to do?
Where's the next step? Where are you leading now?
Exactly. And so, but it was at the Christian Communicators Conference, and I went to several, probably for 2 or 3 years. But there was one in 2021, Gina. I was sitting there listening to all of these other women who were attending the conference, and we all had to do a 3-minute reel. And it was one woman after another talking about what Jesus had been doing in their life. And then the light bulb went off. And he just said, gather some women that have powerful Jesus stories that are going to talk about me, and let's do a conference. And
had you ever been to a women's conference?
Maybe one. I didn't know anything about a women's conference. But God doesn't frame it like that.
No, he does not.
He just asks you to do a simple thing.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I know women who can talk about Jesus. I mean, I'd been, all weekend, at this conference retreat. Yeah. And Lord, that doesn't seem that hard. And so that is how Deep in the Heart started, was basically gathering, women who had been, who had experienced God's
transformation and redemption.
Yes, in their life.
And had a story
to tell. And so in 22, Gina, is when we became a nonprofit, and so you've been involved because I remember you and Callie doing the giveaway door prizes.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, we did. We did the door prizes.
The door prizes the first year, and then the second and third year, I think you were a speaker, and so. But yeah, so we've done 4 annual Deep in the Heart women's conferences in East Texas, and all of the stories have been recorded, and they're on our YouTube channel, and we've had every single topic under the sun. As you know, cultural things are big to me, that us Christians need to speak the truth and unveil the deception that is going on. And so, the gender ideology, the transgender and the LGBTQ issues and all that. I mean, God has brought the women and men now, that have walked that life who are saying, no, none of that is true. I mean, it's just the enemy who blinds us so much from experiencing who Jesus is and the forgiveness and the healing that he wants for you. And,
as I'm listening to this, Grace, I keep going back to God's sovereignty and how he has mercy in our lives. Even when you were not a believer, God had mercy on your soul.
Mm-hmm. He did.
And he was still preparing a way for you to come to know him.
Right.
And he used all of those times in med school and all these things that have happened in your life to bring you to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think, well, all we did in the past doesn't matter. I mean, we need to move on. We don't need to dwell in the past, but God has used that history to write our story.
Right.
And wow, for you and for myself. I mean, you're sitting here and you're talking about the conference, and I remember, I guess it was probably 2020. Well, I know it was 2020. That was when I had written the book or had published the Bible study book.
Right.
And I was involved in a thing with a mutual friend of ours, and we had like a big book, expo kind of thing where people came and they could see we had all these different local authors and things. And I remember looking at all those, there were a lot of women authors, and I remember looking at all these women authors, and I walked around to every one of them that had written some kind of faith-based book about the Lord, and I said, we could all get together and do a women's conference. You could speak about this, and you could speak about this, and you could speak about this.
Okay.
I've never told you this.
Yeah.
And nothing ever came of it.
Okay.
So we did that in 2020, and then we did it again in 21. And in 21, this mutual friend says, hey, I got to hook you up with Dr. Grace English. And you and I met at the bagel place.
I know.
And I think about that, that God in his sovereignty had worked all that out together. And now here we are 5-6 years later.
Right.
About to do a men's conference.
Right.
Which I don't want to go there yet. So Deep in the Heart started. You gathered a bunch of great women, made a board, nonprofit. We spent a summer going through a lot of work putting this nonprofit together. I actually began to function like a nonprofit is supposed to function.
Right.
And then last year in the summertime, right before summer, you decided that the Lord revealed to you he wanted you to do a podcast.
Yes, and I never listened to a podcast.
Never been to a women's conference, but we did a women's conference. Never listened to a podcast, but I'm going to do a podcast.
But you know how he asked me? He basically said, well, that time before 2020, I was trying to figure out ministry-wise what do I need to be doing? And I was working with a mentor, and I cannot remember her name, but I see her face. But anyways, she had asked me, how has God wired you? Mm-hmm. And so then I started to tell her, well, my husband tells me that I have a way of asking people questions about their personal life, that they start sharing things that they've never shared with anybody before, and that they're could be asking me for advice or, just sharing with me what has happened. And she's like, that's not really a common thing for everybody to do that. And I was like, okay, I just thought it was because it's very easy for me. And then one day I just remembered, I was like, I wish I could have a microphone into like these conversations that I have with people. And I would love for the world to hear how God has changed and brought about what he wants in their life. And then
bingo. let's do a podcast.
Right. And so, as you know, you were there.
Oh, yeah.
For the podcast.
Oh, yeah, I was there.
That we didn't know anything about podcasts. And so now we're approaching, the end of our second year. And we're going to start our third year in the fall of 2026. And so.
Which now it's dropping weekly.
Yes, it's dropping weekly. We still only have 2 new a month, but in between we do have our reruns. But I don't know, Gina, and you know this, and you're the same way. It's like, okay, I just want to get these Jesus stories out.
Yeah.
This is a way of doing this to get it across this world. Okay. Can't be that hard. And instead of just doing it at a once-a-year conference, let's get them out all through the year.
Right. And so you started, let's see, you began to film in the summer of 24, but the podcast first aired in September of 24.
Yes.
And from that time on, not only have you interviewed speakers that we've had at the women's conference, but also just different people that you've come in contact with that you knew that have had different things happen in their lives and different topics. There's been a lot of cultural topics. There's been a lot of faith topics, what I call normal everyday life stuff, anxiety, dealing with hate, dealing with anger, that kind of thing, And so to me, it's amazing that I remember thinking, how is she going to get all these guests? Where are these guests going to come from? And they just keep rolling right on in. And then somehow you talk me into doing this. And so.
Right. Well, you're comfortable with a mic. And so this is natural for you, I think. But you're right, Gina. It's all like, Lord, if you want this to continue, please bring the people. Please lay on my heart the topics that need to be talked about. And he clearly said, you don't need anybody famous. You just need somebody who knows me and has experienced what I've done in their life and is willing to share.
That is the niche that Deep in the Heart Ministries has right there. We've been told 2 or 3 times we need to have a big name speaker come in. That's how you're going to pull a big audience. But you and I both agree that we deal in the everyday, in the routine, and we want to bring folks that you might see at the grocery store or that you're going to see at the restaurant or, at TJ Maxx when you're shopping the good deals and just people that are just everyday, normal, routine folks and what God does in their life and how he has transformed them and redeemed them.
Right.
And so back in the spring, I guess, of 25, after we had the women's conference, which was probably our biggest one yet, that Friday night was pretty much standing room only. And that just blew our mind.
Yeah.
Because we always, we have expectations and then God's like, oh, let me just show you what I can do.
Right.
Let me show you what I can do.
Right.
And he always exceeds those expectations. But after the women's conference in 25, we both agreed, you came up with it, I came along with you, that maybe we should do a men's conference.
Yes.
And I can honestly say, I've never been to a men's conference, and neither have you.
Neither have I. But, who cares?
And we've never planned anything like this, but here we are.
Right.
We are doing it. And so tell us about that. What's that going to look like?
Well, I was just going to say, not only does the Lord want just common day, everyday folks to share their testimony. I mean, it doesn't matter what your audience is, who your audience is. You share your story,
right?
Whether it's at home, your workplace or whatever. And I knew, Gina, when after finally, getting the 4th women's conference under her belt, that I always knew from the start that it would just not be for women. I had people ask me, why is it just for women? Why can't men have it? I already knew that there was a need for men. There's just not
men. We have men that come to the women's conference.
Yes, we have.
And they're not just there because their wives are there. They're there because they want to be there.
Right. They want to hear stories.
They want to hear the stories.
And men are more isolated. They don't have the community. They don't have the camaraderie that us women who talk and share our hearts with other women. Men are just more isolated, and I really feel like they have really strong struggles, and they need to have that encouragement where they can hear another man who's walked down that same road, who has been broken free and released from it, and now is on the other side. And so this upcoming, the men's conference, our first one was in February of this year, and the topics that we've had are breaking free from pornography, deliverance from drug and alcohol addiction, healing from abortion. These are all just regular men who have experienced a really raw and real life, and that they got to a place where they surrendered and finally submitted to what God wanted to do with all the wreckage that had happened. And so, but, we also had breakout speakers that talked about anger. How do you, gut out anger out of your life?
Addictive habits. How to break those. Social media. The social media, all that stuff.
Shopping, food, all of that, And so, I don't know. I just feel like there is definitely a place for the men's conference my desire is to have this every single year and to have a variety of different speakers, a variety of different topics, and see what God does with it, And so, the weekend is not going to be like, oh, all my problems are gone.
Absolutely not.
But what it's going to do is it's going to show you that I can't hide from the problems that I have in my life. I've got to get real with Jesus. How do I start? Just that willingness to start, that willingness to find one person that you can tell what actually happened to you. It releases that power of that secret.
What's that little blurb you always say?
The power of the secret is broken when it's spoken. So there's no power left to it.
Right.
The enemy can't use it anymore to make you feel like you're not worthy to do this or that or whatever, or you're working for your salvation or whatever. All the misconceptions.
Right.
And so I'm hoping, that the men's conference is going to be a huge success. I am really excited about it. And everybody that I've talked to, men wise, seem to be craving and wanting a space like this.
Yeah.
For men.
Yeah. And the cool thing is you and I aren't going to be up front.
No, we're not.
We're going to be back in the kitchen.
We're going to be back in the kitchen. So,
we're going to be back in the kitchen. We don't have to be up front.
It's fine with me. But yeah, I just feel like, Gina, like with all the things that God has asked you to do, asked me to do, asked any one of us to do, he poses that, he gives us that opportunity, but just asking us to do a simple request. And many times he already knows it's something that is easy for us. And so, by the time Deep in the Heart rolled around, we lived in this community, for, 2 decades, and more. And, I had been around other speakers, been around a lot of other people in the community. So it just didn't seem hard,
Right.
I don't know if he would have asked me 2 decades before, but, and he already had continued to season me with, just life experiences. And, God has done, a lot in my life, not just healing from the abortion, but everything else in my life. And he wants to do that in all of our lives, in every single area. So
one of the things that I have always admired about you, Grace, because you mentioned Bethesda Health Clinic, and that's how I met you and Dr. John back in 2011, I think.
Yeah.
Was your transparency and your honesty about yourself and your relationship with Jesus. And that has always struck me, both you and Dr. John. I've always said they're so genuine, they're so real. There's nothing fake about them at all. There's no pretense at all. Why do you think, and I think I know the answer to this, but just explain to the listeners before we finish up why it is important to share your testimony and to be transparent as we walk through life, as we go about in our circles of influence, whether that be at school or home or work or play or wherever it is we are.
Right.
The places that God leads us to on a daily basis. Why is it important to share your testimony and what God's has done and is continuing to do in your life and live a transparent life?
Right. Well, once God gets a hold of your story and he is using it for good, he wants you to share it with others because he wants that for other people who are walking behind you who have not experienced that yet. And there's nothing to hide because the centerpiece is him and not our sin.
Right.
And it's calling us out into the light and to talk about what Jesus, who he is, what he's done, and what he can do with anything and everything that you've been through that's been hard in this life. And so yeah, I mean, the transparency, I don't know, I probably say too much sometimes, Gina, but it's all just to show like we have nothing to hide. Because if we're hiding it, we're hiding ourselves. We think we're protecting ourselves, but we're not.
No.
We're hiding ourselves from God, actually. We're ignoring the fact of these things that have happened to us. We won't even admit to God. I mean, that's just crazy.
Right.
And you can't live like that.
No.
You are not going to have the abundant life if you live like that.
No.
And so
Revelation chapter 12, verse 11, as we finish up, I just saw on your paper that you've got it written down, but it says they triumphed over him. They're talking about the dragon, the beast in Revelation. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb, Jesus Christ and his sacrifice on the cross, and by the word of their testimony. They didn't love their lives so much that as to shrink from death. They
exactly
just told what God had done,
right?
Told what God had redeemed them from, and it did not matter,
right?
What anybody thought about it,
Once you experience Jesus, it's real, and nobody can argue with you about your experience of what God has done in your life. And so, unbelievers and other people can say, "Well, prove this, prove that, prove whatever," but that what he's done in your life is real.
The revelation.
And nobody can argue with you about what he's done.
No.
And so, yes, Revelation 12:11, the power of your testimony. That's how we get the word out about what he did and why he came to this earth, for us, for you, for every one of us.
Right. The last thing he told the disciples before he ascended into heaven, go into all the world.
Right.
Make disciples.
We're his mouthpiece, Gina.
Right. Oh, I call it Jesus with skin on.
Yes.
Jesus with skin on.
I mean, one day he will appear in physical form again, but until then, we're the ones that are broadcasting what he's done and who he is.
Right.
So,
well, thank you, Dr. Grace, for sharing your testimony.
Thanks, Gina.
It's awesome to sit here and visit with you. I mean, I see this woman almost at least once or twice a week, but to sit and have this time to hear her heart and to know what God has done in her life and how he has brought her through to this specific place for such a time as this. And I'm so thankful I get to be a part of it. So join us on the podcast at deepintheheartministries.com. You can see it there. You can go to YouTube. We have our own ministry channel, Deep in the Heart Ministries. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. And we have all kinds of information about the conferences that are coming up. We have a women's conference in October of 26 and the men's conference is in February of 26, plus the podcast every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I'm Gina Butler. We'll see you later.
This podcast is made possible in part by Express Employment Professionals, the leading staffing agency in East Texas, helping thousands of businesses find the right employees. If you're looking for a job, visit expresspros.com to learn more. If you enjoyed this podcast, visit deepintheheartministries.com/podcast, where you can find all previous episodes, subscribe to our channel, or leave a suggestion for future topics. You can also email Grace at drgraceenglish.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.